Hello, my friends. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Crystal. If you are new to watching, I post all types of bookish content here. I post book reviews, reading vlogs, book favorites, monthly wrap-ups, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing today. But if you are a fellow bookworm and you love to read as much as I do, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. So I'm going to just jump right into today's video, and I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of September. These are them. I read 7 books in September, and I will say that September was such a good reading month for me, with the exception of a couple of books, but I found some new favorites and I just had such an enjoyable time reading last month. Okay, the first book I read in September was The Girls in the Cabin by Caleb Stevens. This book, if you watched my last video of my spooky season book recommendations, you have heard me talk about this book before. This is one of my new favorite thrillers. I loved everything about this book, and this is one that I will recommend going forward to anyone who loves thrillers. This is a psychological thriller. It is dark, it is spooky. It has like a creepy cabin in the woods type of setting. It's also rainy and snowy and cold. It's just the perfect book to read in the fall and winter time. This book is about Chris, who takes his 2 daughters on a camping trip, and they have to sort of hike through the mountains a little bit to get to their camping destination. Now, one of his daughters gets injured and she can't move around very much. So they are basically trying to find help and seek shelter. Well, they end up stumbling upon a cabin. So immediately Chris runs over to this cabin and is basically begging for help. So once they get inside this cabin and they think that they are safe, all of these things start happening, and what they experience in this cabin is something that he never would have expected. This is also told in multiple point of views. So there's another character by the name of Clara, and it takes you back to her childhood back in the 80s. And then as the story progresses, her point of view starts coming closer to present day. And the way that this book unraveled, I loved it so much. So this is a book that I will always, and forever recommend to anyone who loves dark psychological thrillers. I obviously gave this book 5 stars. The next book that I read in September was Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. This book is a dark romance, and I will say that the beginning of this book is very heavy. There are some scenes that are a little bit hard to read. So if you do plan on reading this, this is dark romance. This is not like a light and fluffy story. So just keep that in mind before you read this. This book is about Cora and Dean, and they end up getting abducted on a random night out. They are being held captive in this man's basement, and Cora and Dean are not the best of friends. Cora's sister is actually engaged to Dean, and her and Dean have never really gotten along that well. What happens in this basement while they're being held captive, I don't even have the word. It's like, obviously bad things are happening to them, and they are going through a very traumatic time. It basically changes their entire life. And it also alters the course of Cora and Dean's relationship. I really loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. The only reason why it didn't get 5 stars for me is because I felt like this story was missing a little bit of the family dynamic. Once Cora and Dean get abducted, you don't really get the point of view of the family and what the family went through with them being missing, like what the family was going through, what they were trying to do in order to find them, like things like that. I feel like that little piece was missing for me in this story, but other than that, I absolutely loved it. While some parts of this were tough to read, I felt like this was such a beautiful and touching story at the same time. So overall, I really enjoyed this. I really liked Jennifer Hartman's writing, and I will absolutely be reading more of her books. Okay, the next book that I read in September was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This has been sitting on my shelf for so long. I finally picked it up because the next book comes out this month in October. I would consider this a spicy adult rom-com. This book is about Anastasia and Nate, who are both in college, and Anastasia is a figure skater and Nate is a hockey player. And something ends up happening where they have to end up sharing the rink for their practices. So she has to practice her figure skating, he has to practice hockey, and it's sort of like a forced proximity. Now, they are attracted to each other, but they don't really start off on the right foot. And Anastasia is one of those people who's a little bit kind of closed off when it comes to relationships. She's not really someone who commits because she's more so committed to her figure skating career than she is to relationships. I ended up giving this book 3.75 stars. I felt like 3.5 was too low, but 4 was too high. First off, I did not like Anastasia as a character. She did kind of end up growing on me towards the end, but it is really, really hard for me to love a book when I just don't like one of the main characters. It was really hard for me because Anastasia she was funny and she was charming and she was very confident, but there was also some things about her where I was just so annoyed through most of the book. She was just very detached. That's like the only word that I can describe it. Very like anti-commitment, very like, it's my world, you're living in it type of person. And I did like her in some parts of the book. It was funny and she's kind of like one of the guys and I really liked that about her, but there was just things about her that I couldn't see past, and she's just not my favorite character. I also felt like there was a lot of fluff in this book and it didn't need to be as long as it was. It's like 425 pages and I felt like it easily could have been like 350. There were a lot of situations and scenes in this book that I felt like were just kind of unnecessary and they were just like filler. So I found myself like skimming some of those parts because I was like, I just don't care, like, you know? With all that to say, I did enjoy this book and I had fun while I was reading it. The spice in this book is so good. I will give it that. So I definitely enjoyed it enough to read the second book. And I think the second book is set like at a summer camp or something. I had a good time with it. There was just little things that I like didn't necessarily love about it. So 3.75 for me. Woo, okay, the next 3 books I'm gonna talk about all together because this is part of a series, and that is none other than the Cat and Mouse series by H.D. Carlton. Again, if you watched my last video, my spooky season book recommendations, then you've heard me talk about these books before, but I'm gonna be going into a little bit more detail in this video than I did in that one. But this is a 3-book series, and a lot of people, for some reason, don't talk about the little novella that comes along with this series, and it drives me crazy because now that I've read this, I don't know why this book is left out because I feel like it is very important and it adds to the overall experience of reading this series. So the first book, this is the little novella that goes along with this series, is called Satan's Affair. And then the next book is Haunting Adeline. Technically, this is book 1. And then book 2 is Hunting Adeline. Satan's Affair, this book is set in a traveling haunted house. So there's a character by the name of Sibby, and she basically is working in this haunted house and she dresses up like a doll. There are things that she's doing in this haunted house that are absolutely freaking sane, but I freaking loved it. I loved it so much. What does that say about me? What does that say about me? I don't care because I love this book so much. Without saying too much, Sibby, who is the main character in this one, is basically trying to cleanse the world of evil people. I will stop there and only say that because that is basically the theme of this book. This book too, you get introduced to Zaid, who is one of the main characters in the Cat and Mouse duet. You get introduced to him in this book. He's not a main character, but he does come in and you are introduced to him in this book. This book is gruesome. It is dark. It is bloody. It is wildly disturbing. There were scenes that I actually I had to put the book down and take a breath because I can't even put into words how it made me feel. But there were times where I literally had to put the book down and I was like, okay, I need a little bit of a breather and then I can go back. And it takes a lot for me to be affected that way in a book to where I have had to put a book down and take a little bit of a breather. I actually don't think I've ever really had to do that in a book until this one. It is intense. It is very, very, very spicy, but in a very taboo type of way. So it is a very non-conventional type of spice. I absolutely think that you need to read this book first if you are planning to read Haunting Adeline and Hunting Adeline. Once you read Satan's Affair and then you jump into Haunting Adeline, there are some scenes in here sort of towards the middle of the book that connect with Satan's Affair. And those scenes in Haunting Adeline will make so much more sense and they're just gonna hit different if you've read Satan's Affair. So my personal opinion, do not skip this book if you are planning to read this series. All right, and now we have Haunting Adeline. This is technically book 1 in the series. I don't want to, and I can't really say too much about these 2 books in terms of the plot without completely spoiling it. So I'm not going to say too much about the plot itself, but this book is about Adeline and Zaid. Adeline is an author and Zaid is basically infatuated with Adeline. So he takes it upon himself to go after her. And his goal in life is to get her and be with her. But Adeline has no idea who Zayd even is. So long story short, he basically stalks her. And while she is terrified, she is also very intrigued by it, and she kind of likes the thrill of it. That is all I will say. I do not want to say anything else. I was pleasantly surprised by how this book made me feel. I went into this series knowing that it was very dark and that it was going to be disturbing and it was going to be very graphic. In my opinion, this book was not as dark as I was expecting it to be. It is dark, don't get me wrong, but I went into it thinking it was going to be pitch black, but it was more of like a dark gray. The house that Adeline lives in is like, it's probably one of my favorite houses that I've read about in a book. It's just like this, just imagine this big, gothic, dark, creepy mansion. It also has a slight, like very, very slight paranormal undertone. Like there's some little scenes that are paranormal themed, and I love anything paranormal. So I was very pleasantly surprised by that. The spice in here is absolutely wild. It's just, this book is not for the faint of heart. Just know that going in. There's also a little bit of a mystery happening in this book as like a little bit of a subplot. And I just really enjoyed that. I had a blast. Now, I will say, I think it depends on your threshold. Some people may think that this is the darkest book that they've ever read and that it is too graphic and too triggering, too dark. Me personally, I have a very high threshold for what I consider dark and disturbing. To me, in my personal opinion, it really wasn't that bad. Now, I will say there is a plot point in this book and in this series that is very, very serious, and it is very evil. It is very dark. But overall, I loved the mystery and the intrigue in this one, the angst in this book. Oh, y'all, it's good. Okay, so now I want to talk about Hunting Adeline. This book is significantly, like 10 times heavier than Haunting Adeline is. While I had fun reading Haunting Adeline, this book is not fun. This is not fun. This really goes into some really, really heavy and evil topics. You go through so many emotions reading this. I was taken on this just like dark, disturbing, sad, emotional, painful ride. But this book also is so full of healing and strength. There are scenes in this book that are very, very, very difficult to read. My heart has never pounded so hard reading a book before. This series is not for everyone. It is absolutely not for everyone. Just know going into this that you are going to be taken down a very, very, very dark road. H.G. Carlton does not hold back on details. You're gonna get details in every single thing that she talks about in this book. She does not hold back. This whole series is unlike anything that I've ever read. It's absolutely one of my favorite series of all time. But obviously this is a 5-star series for me. This is a 6-star series for me. And I'm just so glad that I finally read it and got to experience these books. Right, and then the last book that I read to finish off the month was Juniper Hill by Devney Perry. This is the second book in the Edens series. Indigo Ridge is the first book. This book is about Memphis and Knox. And Knox is one of the brothers in the Eden family. He basically is in charge of the restaurant in the hotel that his family owns in their small town of Quincy, Montana. If I could live in any books like town or city, it would be Quincy, Montana. It is absolutely adorable. Like the way that Devney Perry paints the picture of Quincy, it is so vivid to me in my mind. And it makes me feel like I am there in their small little town, and I absolutely just love it. And the Eden family is basically very big in their town. They pretty much own the town. So anyway, this book is about Knox, and he ends up meeting Memphis. Memphis comes into their town from New York City. She went through some pretty, I guess, traumatic things in New York, and she's just wanting a fresh start. So she ends up moving from New York City to Quincy, Montana with her son. She starts working at the hotel in town, which is of course owned by one of the Eden family members. Memphis is kind of down on her luck. She doesn't really have a lot of money. She can't afford a lot of the places in town. And so she ends up moving into this little small loft type of apartment above Knox's garage. So I would consider this a forced proximity trope. And Knox is honestly not very fond of them living on his property because he is someone who just likes to be alone. He likes his own space. And Memphis comes in with her newborn son, and her son is like always crying. He's always waking up Knox in the middle of the night, and he's just not crazy about them living there. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. And honestly, if it wasn't for my love for Quincy and their town and my love for the Eden family, I probably would have given this book 2 stars. In terms of the plot and the story, I honestly was just bored, and I couldn't really connect with Memphis's character. I didn't really like her as a character. She's the type of person who just needs so much constant validation and reassurance, and she's very self-deprecating in a way. She was like that throughout the whole entire book, and it just got really old and it just got annoying, and I was like, okay, I don't care about this person anymore. I also could not feel the chemistry between Memphis and Knox. There was something about their chemistry that was just missing, and I just didn't believe it. Like, I was reading the words on the pages, I was reading about their chemistry, I just couldn't feel it. And for me, like, I need to feel something when I'm reading a book, and their chemistry, I didn't feel it. I didn't care about it. I didn't believe it. Another really big theme in this book is about Memphis being a single mother, and her son is a huge theme in this book. And I personally, I just don't really like kids in books. It's just a personal preference. I love them in real life, don't get me wrong. I just don't like kids in books. Like, I don't mind if they're a side character, but the main theme in this was about her being a single mom, and it was about her and her son. I feel like that was even more of a theme than their romance was. Like, that plot line of her being a single mother just took over the whole entire story for me. I don't know, it's just not my favorite trope, which makes me really sad because I felt the complete opposite about Indigo Ridge. Indigo Ridge is probably one of my favorite books that I have read all year. I absolutely loved it. It was so good. And so I was really excited to read the second book in the series, and it just fell really flat for me. Now, I will obviously be reading the other books in the series, just because of how much I love the Eden family and how much I love their small little town. And I'm assuming the other books have different tropes and stuff. So I absolutely will be reading the rest of the books at some point. A 3 stars simply because of their family and because of their town. And also because I feel like some people may actually really love this book. If you love books about kids, and if you love books about motherhood, then you would probably really enjoy this. It's just not my favorite trope. So yeah, 3 stars for me. All right, so this is them. These are the books that I read in September. Let me know in the comments if y'all have read any of these books. I would love to know your thoughts. And that is it for this video, y'all. I hope that y'all enjoyed it. Also, let me know in the comments if you are planning to add any of these books to your TBR based on my recommendation of them, based on my review. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will put all of my social media handles here on the screen. I would love it if y'all would come follow along over there as well. Again, I appreciate y'all watching, and I will see y'all in my next video. Bye!